All right, so we've talked about all the other D&D campaign settings. We're going to talk about the ones that they don't talk about that often.
Yay, nerd time! Welcome to episode 235 of Nerdery and Murdery.
Big 235. I'm Zig with your Nerdery.
And I'm Geoffrey with your Murdery. Welcome to another week of the highs and lows, the ups and downs, the good and the bad, and the nerd and the murd. We're fast approaching episode 250 for our next wife swap, and I'm not going to mention, Zig knows what it is, but I'm not going to mention it, but I'm very excited about it. I took some deep dives on this one, and it's funny because
playlist is made, by the way. It's already out there. Go check it out.
Zig was like, well, why didn't you do this one or this one? I said, because what I've got here is a story. It creates a story, and there's a definitive reason why I covered what I covered.
Fair.
So
I get it.
Very
Believe
excited
me, I get
it.
it.
Very excited about it. So stay tuned for that. Episode 250 coming very soon in just 15 episodes. So for those of you listening today, it's 15 weeks away. Be sure to stand by, stay tuned, and, be weird. So with that, I will let Zig step over on the nerdery side of the house.
All right. Today, we're going to talk about D&D. And as we've talked about before, we talked about all these different campaign settings, the ones that were huge and really, really big, and the ones that are still around. And some of these are not necessarily still around. Today, we're going to talk about Kara-Tur, Al-Qadim, Maztica, and a little bit on Anchorome.
I'm not familiar with any of these.
Some of the characters or some of the character classes and races have made it outside of these, but these were they were kind of put out in the 80s and 90s and then fell out of favor. So,
all right.
Aber-Toril is the fictional planet that makes up the Forgotten Realms Dungeons and Dragons campaign setting, as well as Al-Qadim and Maztica campaign settings and the first edition version of the Oriental Adventure campaign setting, which has been called Kara-Tur now, because Oriental Adventures is just not cool to say. The name means cradle of life in an archaic fictional language of the setting. It consists of various continents and islands, including Faerun, which is where most of Forgotten Realms takes place, Kara-Tur, Zakara, Maztica, Aussie, Anchorome, and Katashaka, a sub-Saharan-like continent south of Maztica, where humanity appeared. Toril was originally the name of Jeff Grubb's personal campaign world before part of it was merged with Ed Greenwood's Forgotten Realms setting. So we're going to start with Kara-Tur. Kara-Tur's cultures and people are fantasy analogs of medieval regions of East Asia, including China, Korea, Japan, and the Ryukyu Islands, Tibet, and others. According to Jim Bambra, while primarily drawing on Japan for inspiration, Kara-Tur also contains elements of medieval China and Korea. Kara-Tur was first described in the original 1985 Oriental Adventures book. Again, we wouldn't call it that anymore. A reviewer of White Dwarf called the long background section of Kara-Tur in the book a bonus. Originally intended as a western part of the continent of Oric in the Greyhawk setting, the description of Kara-Tur in the Oriental Adventures rulebook made no attempt to link it with another D&D game world. The first map of Kara-Tur appeared in the adventure module OA1, Swords of the Daimyo, released in 1986, where the setting is still world neutral. The 1987 Forgotten Realms campaign set left the eastern half of its continent reserved for the future publications of Kara-Tur. In 1988, TSR released a box set, Kara-Tur, The Eastern Realms, describing the region in great detail with a 96-page book and maps. In the process of adapting the setting for the Forgotten Realms, the size of the continent was scaled down significantly. The 10 distinct nations and regions described in the box set and their real-world analogs include Shaolong, which is Imperial China during periods of centralized government, Tulung, historical China during eras of political disunity, e.g., the Warring States period. Wa, which is feudal Japan. Kozakura, which is I'm sorry. Wa is feudal Japan in the Kamakura period. Kozakura is Japan in the Sinogoku period. Northern Waste is historical Eastern Siberia. Tabat is Tibet. Koryo is Korea. The island kingdoms are pre-colonial civilizations of Indonesia and the Philippines. The Plain of Horses is historically Mongolia. This region is the Kara-Tur portion of the Horde lands, also known as the Endless Wastes. The jungle lands of Malatra, pre-colonial civilizations of Indochina, historical versions of the Khmer Empire and Vietnam, as well as the hill tribes inspired by their real-life Southeast Asian counterparts. In 1989, a printing of trail maps for Kara-Tur appeared as part of the Advanced Dungeons & Dragons second edition. In 1990, the maps were again included in the Forgotten Realms Atlas. During that year, TSR converted the Monsters of Kara-Tur to second edition Advanced Dungeons & Dragons rules as part of the Monstrous Compendium series. After 1990, TSR ceased publication of new materials related to Kara-Tur. The setting was, however, occasionally referred to by other TSR products such as Spelljammer and Ravenloft. Setting of Kara-Tur still exists on Abertorial in Dungeons & Dragons 3rd edition and is often mentioned in Forgotten Realms supplements. Characters and artifacts from Kara-Tur sometimes show up in Faerûn, but beyond that, there is little interaction between the continents. In 2015, release of Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide, a supplement for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, introduced Kara-Tur to the 5th edition of Dungeons & Dragons. There's a brief description of the lands along with references throughout the book and its culture and how certain classes or backgrounds might fit in there. Michael Mullen, looking at the setting of Kara-Tur before the publication of the box set, stated the players would probably like the world, but it would depend largely on how familiar the DM was with Asian cultures or Japanese movies and television. He remarked that the usual opposition, if not human, will be from the spirit world rather than more conventional battles versus monsters. Game study scholar Aaron Trammell commented that although Gygax envisioned a campaign setting that brought a multicultural dimension to Dungeons & Dragons, the reality is that by lumping together Chinese, Japanese, Korean, Mongolian, Philippine, and Southeast Asian lore, that he and co-authors David Zepp Cook and Francois Marcel Fredeville actually developed a campaign setting that reinforced Western culture's already racist understanding of the quote-unquote Orient. I disagree. I think they were trying. I think they were trying to bring in some Eastern settings to D&D in the mid '80s, and they just didn't have a great understanding of the cultures, except through the material that we got here in the '80s and the '90s, i.e., Japanime and kung fu movies and things of that nature. So if you look at it, it is through that lens. So if you're familiar with kung fu movies and in anime, the anime that we were getting here at the time, not the anime we get now, your understanding of it would be better because that's what you're seeing. I mean, we didn't really get a lot of that in the United States, especially I don't want to, cast aspersions on Gary Gygax, but in, mayonnaise land of Wisconsin, they don't get a lot of kung fu movies up there. What they got was probably dubbed and redubbed and dubbed again. But there are related products associated with it. They had 8 adventure modules: Swords of the Daimyo, Knight of the Seven Swords, Okima, the Spirit Warrior, Blood of the Yakuza, Mad Monkey versus the Dragon Claw, Ninja Wars, Ronin Challenge, and Test of the Samurai. 3 choose-your-own-adventure style books. One was actually released before the original Oriental Adventure set. Blade of the Young Samurai, Test of the Ninja, and Warlords. One of the novels is the Empire trilogy set in Shoulong and Kara-Tur, Ditting Troy, Dragon Wall, And Dragon number 315 for information on ancestors, feats, and martial art styles specific to the Kara-Tur settings, as well as updated information on the 10 empires regions of Kara-Tur. So this was actually a whole campaign setting. They had a nice big box set on it. It's really pretty. You can readily go out and find this stuff now. There's a lot of really, really good artwork in it, and it adds flavor. And anytime you get a ninja in D&D, which they have them, they're from there. That's where they come from. Plus some other weird creatures and people. The only person I know who had this was Don's got some of these. He's actually got them labeled as Oriental Adventures. This is before the Kara-Tur stuff came out. Because again, he was a big collector of this stuff back in the day. I liked it. I thought the errata was really nice. There's some really interesting stuff in there. Again, I don't think they were trying to intentionally be racist about it. I think they were just trying to bring it more multicultural, because we had, Asian people who like to play. It's like, oh, they probably want to see themselves in the game. Let's see if we can't do that. I think it was a way for them to try to bring more people in. And I don't necessarily think they failed, but it didn't sell very well either. So it was one of those things that kind of shut down. But again, it still pops up. It's still on all the trail maps and things like that. And if you're familiar with that material, you can kind of have a good time playing in that. The next set we'll be talking about is Al-Qadim. Al-Qadim takes place in Zakhara. It's a fictional realm styled after the themes and settings and the depictions of the Arabian Nights. The land is a setting of again, that Al-Qadim campaign setting. And it's a giant peninsula on the same supercontinent, Faerun, as Kara-Tur and, again, the rest of Forgotten Realms. Zakhara is located east of Faerun, and the closest Faerunian lands to Zakhara are Dambrath by sea and Ulgarth, or arguably Cunningham by land. Zakhara is mostly isolated from the rest of the world, as the peninsula is separated from the main mass by the World Pillar Mountains, also known as the Wupiti Shao in Kara-Tur. The Zakharian pantheon consists of several cultures, like the cultures of enlightenment and more savage deities such as Regara. Waters around Zakhara are bountiful with pirates and corsairs who charge trading tolls to cross their seas. Such traders willingly pay these exorbitant fees, as Zakhara's exotic trading goods tend to be well worth the price back in Faerun. Occasionally, the pirates decide to completely cut off Zakhara from Faerun. The land is full of secretive cities, unwelcome to travelers, huge deserts, lush oases, and powerful jinns or genies who meddle in the affairs of humans frequently. The continent is ruled by a theocracy headed by the Grand Caliph, and tales tell of demon-infested cities and godless sorcerers like the genie binding shairs wielding strange magic. Powerful magic and great warriors of every like are to be found in Zakhara. Zakharans are firmly convinced they are more civilized than the rest of the world and treat barbarians accordingly. The capital city of Zakhara is Huzuz, or the City of Delights. The setting itself proclaims to have much more in common with early Hollywood depictions rather than the hard historical facts. Again, I've seen some of this Zakhara stuff before, usually in the Al-Qadim settings. It's more flavor for Dungeons & Dragons, particularly Forgotten Realms. And again, most people, when they think of D&D, they're thinking of Forgotten Realms. They're not thinking of Greyhawk or Spelljammer or any of that.
Right.
Maybe a little less so now, but most of the stuff is centered around Forgotten Realms because that's what everybody wants to play in. Because it's such a big place to play in, and you got all these really cool these cool things. And in this case, you get like Arabic style cities or Saharan and Arabian cities. Yeah, exotic ideas of harems and Arabian courtesans, and tropes from Orientalist fiction. Um, you got a ruling caliph. Um, it was first released in 1992, and I would say that because of the backlash they'd gotten a little bit from um, Kara-Tur, they were a little less Hollywood in design and basically viewed towards 1001 Nights, the Arabian Nights, as a theme and a set in the land of Zakara. Thematically, again, it's a little more Hollywood, but it was perceived as being a little less racist, I guess, than Kara-Tur was. Of course, they also called Kara-Tur Oriental Adventures when they first released it, which is not great. Al-Qadim, um, Arabian Adventures, was a source book. It described the character creation rules, equipment, and spells unique to the setting. And Al-Qadim Land of Fate was a box set describing the land of Zakara with separate source books for the players and the dungeon master. Arabian Adventures was released in 1992. It was much like the original Oriental Adventures book. Specific details of settings are dealt with in later publications. Shannon Appelkline commented on Al-Qadim's 1992 release, an Arabic setting that ended up placed in the southern Forgotten Realms. Like the other games of this period, it has a strong artistic design, and it does. Here, overseen by Adrian Haiti, the cultural book, as Grubb called it, tried to suggest it was an Oriental Adventures-like release rather than a full-blown campaign. I would disagree. I want to say these were basically separate campaigns. That eventually they all, because they all had separate rule sets. They were close to Forgotten Realms, but they weren't exactly it. But when everybody switched up to AD&D second edition, they were basically all thrown into that. Their society is mostly humans. There are demi-humans such as elves and dwarves, as well as humanoids such as orcs, goblinoids, and ogres. But unlike most settings, there is practically no racial disharmony in Zakara. Humans, elves, and orcs alike share the same cultural, lifestyle, and social status. And races traditionally considered evil savages such as goblins are instead valued members of society. The nomadic Al-Badia are predominantly human, whereas Al-Hadar possess greater diversity. The nomads and city dwellers, humans and non-humans alike, are all united in a single culture under a single religion, a polytheistic pastiche of Islam. Or it's not actually Islam, it's like pre-Islam, like, the Arabian culture pre-Islam, which Islam draws a lot from, and they are subject to the caliph. Not all inhabitants of Zakara belong to that shared culture. There are many tribes of pagan human barbarians who reject the law of the Lord Giver and the worship of the pantheon and certain monstrous races, including the Yuan-Ti, the vile Yakmen, or Yakari, which they call themselves, and most giants dwell apart in their own societies. A lot of giants in this game, too. Zagar has a wide variety of gods, but all recognize the power of fate. In the distant past, a woman known only as the Lord Giver penned the scrolls that clearly laid out the laws of the land, which they all kind of practice. The player characters in the setting can choose from any number of character types. Al-Qadim uses the concept of character kits, a more rigid layer atop the traditional character classes. These kits are generally available to all characters with certain restrictions based on the race of that character. Again, you've got all the races present. The City of Delights accessory suggests goblins, hobgoblins, kobolds, lizardmen, ogres, half-orcs. Orcs and half-orcs are appropriate PC races as well. So this is basically where it started with. In the original D&D, you couldn't play an evil race. In this case, it's like, well, they're not necessarily evil. You can play one. Which subsequently, a lot of these races you can now play in D&D now. But back in the day, you couldn't play a lizardman. It's totally okay now. This is where that kind of started. The kits described in the core companion setting are as follows. Askar, citizen warrior. Corsairs, seaborne warriors or pirates. Desert riders or nomadic fighters who ride horses and camels across the desert. Faris, holy warriors fighting for their faith. Mameluke, a slave warrior. Mercenary barbarian, warriors from abroad. Outland warriors, fighters truly foreign to the lands of Zakara. The wizards are elemental mage. You can use this. The elements are sand, sea, flame, and wind. Sha'ir, wizards whose magic centers on genies, is aided by the familiar jinns or minor genies. Sorcerer, the most common wizard in Zakara, who deals with 2 elemental forces. Ajami, outland wizards from beyond the land of fate. Your rogues, you've got a Saluk, freemen or women who follow their own path. Berber, experts in the ways of the bazaar and the city. Beggar thief, often overlooked. Holy Slayer, assassins, working for an assassin order. Matrud, tribal castouts. And merchant rogue, masters of the mercantile arts who carry the trade from town to town. I want to say the merchant rogue is probably closest to a bard. Rawun, the storytellers and bards of Zakaran society, as well as the Rawun. And the priests are different class types. You've got pragmatists, ethoists, moralists, Hakima, Kahin, mystics, and outland priests. So the books they released: Al-Qadim, Arabian Adventures, Monstrous Compendium, Al-Qadim Appendix, Complete Sha'ir's Handbook. The box sets are Al-Qadim, Land of Fate, and City of Delights. And the adventure boxes are Golden Voyage, Assassin Mountain, 101 Adventures, Secrets of the Lamp, Ruined Kingdom, Cities of Bone, Corsairs of the Great Sea, and Caravans. And there was an adventure model reunion as well. So Al-Qadim, what can I say about it? It did have some different rule sets originally. But again, once everybody went to AD&D or D&D second edition or AD&D second edition, which is what most everybody playing in Forgotten Realms was using, all that stuff got moved up. But it still has different flavors to it, especially with those character kits. Al-Qadim was way more popular than Kara-Tur. So it did last a little longer. And it's still available in trail maps and things like that. So, have you ever played any of the Kara-Tur or the Al-Qadim stuff, Geoffrey?
I'm wanting to think that Dawn put us in some of that at one point, because it like I said, I wasn't familiar from the names, but it certainly sounds familiar to me.
Yeah, I know, because Dawn had some of this stuff, and I was
I remember that for sure.
Yeah, I think he's thrown some of this stuff at us before. The next we're going to talk about is Maztica. Maztica calls its inhabitants the true world, is a fictional continent that is a land of jungles, and to the Faerunians, a mystery. The area was heavily inspired by Aztec and Mayan culture. Early in the fictional history, it was land fought over by the gods Kotal, the plumed serpent, and his brother Zoltek for a crime against his sister. Her sister, Kotal, retreated from Maztica at an age, but returned in recent times. It was discovered by Omnian explorers led by one Captain General Cordell and his Golden Legion. Omnian was quick to carve out its claim in the land for trade benefits, establishing the port city of Helmsport, and the Church of Helm led the encroachment into the new lands. The native peoples were devastated by foreign diseases and the ruthlessness of the invaders, and this, coupled with the difficulties encountered on Maztica, backfired against them, causing the Church of Helm to come under heavy criticism. Lanton also claims some lands. Maztica is divided into the nations of Nexal, Kultakaka, Huakli, Kolan, Pezalak, and Payet. The regions known as Far Payet, Neighbor Payet, both in the east around the Helmsport. The native peoples of Maztica from Payet and Far Payet are known as Payets, whereas natives from the other nations are known as Mazticans. There are also the human races known as the Dog People and the Green Folk. Many monstrous races also live in Maztica, including wild halflings and Chocks. Chocks are jaguar spirits. In very old times, Coatil came from Maztica to fight the Yuan-Ti on Chult. Some scorpion folk from Maztica found the Underdark passage to the Underdark of Faerun. So you can get to Maztica by going through the Underdark. North of Maztica is the continent of Anchorome. South of it, separated by a strait, lies an unknown continent. Maztica was detailed for second edition Dungeons & Dragons in the Maztica campaign set by Douglas Niles and in the Forgotten Realms novel of the Maztica trilogy, Iron Helm. Viper Hand and Feathered Dragon, also by Nicholas Niles. It was based on historical Central America. In retrospect review in Blackgate, Scott Taylor found Maztica unimpressive because the continent too closely mirrored Mesoamerica, down to the history of the conquistadors. Rather than creating an ultimate fantasy version inspired by the colorful and diverse reality of Mesoamerica, CBR author Matthew England considered it a rarity in the fantasy genre to base a continent on these cultures. Maztica is also the name of the elder goddess who embodied the land of Maztica, killed by her own son Zaltek. She was the wife of dead Kukul, but unlike her husband, continues to live on the continent, continued existence of the continent. In 4th edition, the spell plague caused by Mistra's death caused Aber and Toril to briefly merge and then instantly rip apart again. As a result, Maztica is no longer a part of Toril, having been replaced with a continent called Returned Aber. On some maps, it has been renamed Anchorome. The Maztica campaign setting is an accessory for the second edition of the Advanced Dungeons & Dragons fantasy role-playing game. Douglas Niles and Tim Beach co-authored it. It was published by TSR Inc. in 1991. So they played around a lot with this Maztica because a lot of people were like, why would you just show this? You know, you're showing the horrible first contact of Europeans into Central America, basically, and how it was awful for everybody involved. But I think after they released that, they kind of backed it up, but they thought, you know what, though, this is a great idea. But it is basically based on Mesoamerica. Anchorome is actually north of it. Anchorome is North America. Maztica is a portmanteau of Maya and Aztec, which Aztec is not actually, the people called themselves Mexica or Mexica. Aztec is something that we put on them much later. So we had to stop explaining that Mexica and Mexico, yes, they come from the same word, but you're not exactly talking about the same. But there are pyramids of the sun and things like that. There are conquistadors. And this is still going on. You've still got Maztica campaign sets and Al-Qadim campaign sets that are still going on. You can still play them, but the Baldurin was a sea captain and founder of Baldur's Gate, sails to Anchorome and returns with a great wealth, which is used to build the wall around the fledgling Baldur's Gate. What he discovers in Anchorome is everybody is a were person. And every time you go, you have to deal with werewolves and were-tigers and were-cats. That kind of plays into Maztica as well, because there are entire races of jaguar people. And they are badass. They end up showing up in races for Forgotten Realms now. So there are jaguar people, there's cougar people, there's like a lion people, which was based on the North American lion. It kind of looks like an African lion, but it's based on the North American lion.
Did the Dragonborn come from this?
I think so. I think either that or Anchorome.
Okay.
Because Anchorome, I included that in that because it's usually you include Anchorome with Maztica when you're playing because there's no book for Anchorome.
Okay.
After the discovery of Maztica by the mercenary Captain Cordell, mercenaries from Flaming Fist are sent to Anchorome. They build a keep, and this is when they come across the creator races known in the Ari. 3 Cree make their home in Anchorome. You've got Saguins, or sea devils. They're fish people, eschewers of magic with 2 or 4 arms, domesticated sharks, and are in frequent conflict conflict and intrigue with the sea elves that live off of the coast, which is exactly where these motherfuckers docked. 3 Kryn are praying mantis people. They have 4 arms and a poisonous bite. Someone considered them a personal favorite. With their additional limbs of specialized chaka and githya weapons, 3 Kryn were infamous as player characters optimized to do extreme amounts of damage. They are pretty badass. And of course, you've got the were jaguars and you've got the jaguar and cougar and North American lion people, which they look like giant tiger men or giant jaguar men. They are not the same as the lycanthropy which exists in Anchorome just north of Maztica. Those motherfuckers, if they bite you, they will turn you into a werewolf or a were whatever, were badger. I mean, it's full of were everything, which fucks people up. So the idea,
there's a lot of F-bombs in this episode.
Yeah, because it's fucking scary.
Because it's Zig getting excited is what this is.
Yes, it is. So, Kara-Tur, Al-Qadim, Maztica, and Anchorome is what I labeled this episode. Maztica and Anchorome are 2 separate places, and I want that, known, but they're basically connected. The same with Kara-Tur and Al-Qadim. Al-Qadim is right next to Kara-Tur, and there's a pass where you can go between the two. It is more difficult to go to the rest of Faerun from those places than to go to each other on the east side. Again, there is still a mountain pass that you have to get through, or a mountain range that you have to get through, but there's pass through it, whereas there's not a pass going west.
Mm-hmm.
Maztica and Anchorome, they're very close together because Maztica is basically Central America into South America, and it's not quite connected to North America, but they're very close. So you can, on a good day, you can see the other part, So they're kind of connected together as well. And I wanted to kind of do these in 2 kind of separate actions. There's another continent as well, which is supposedly where human beings came from. I believe it's supposed to be like sub-Saharan Africa, but nothing's ever been produced about it. Now, having said all that, you can find all of this errata in lots of different places. I would recommend, if you're doing a D&D campaign, dive into some of this old stuff. It is readily convertible to your current rule sets. You can figure out how to work, but you've got all these different character classes and character kits, and you've got all these different races that you can now play, as well as some really interesting places. You could take your party to the jungles of Central and South America and deal with basically blood mages, which is what we deal with in Shadowrun. Or, you could also take that same party on a boat and go back to Faerun on the eastern side and come up through Arabian Nights to deal with jinns and make their way all the way down to Southeast Asia and deal with some of that crazy stuff with Nagas and shit. Just a lot of fun everywhere. But again, because of the restructuring of TSR in the mid to late 90s, I would say, and how TSR nearly shut down. And I understand that Wizards of the Coast eventually bought them out, and now they're being produced by Hasbro. So they're not going anywhere anytime soon. But we actually had about 1980 or 1998, 1999. There was a real fear that the D&D was going to shut down. It was palpable. So they started closing a lot of these lines out because of, okay, Forgotten Realms and Ravenloft are doing really well. We'll keep doing them. This new one we've done, we'll keep doing it, but we'll lose the other stuff. If they got the books, they could still play it. But, 3rd edition and then 3.5 was a way to take all of those rule sets and combine them together so they didn't have as many product lines out there. And I think we lost out on some of the flavor of the game that we had, like Al-Qadim and Kara-Tur and Maztica and Anchorome. Um, uh, Kachaka is the sub-Saharan continent. Aussay is a giant island between Anchorome and Maztica. Just, good flavor, especially if you got a crew that's on a boat. You can go all kinds of places. It's fun to play in. It's a play gym for your brain. Check it out, especially if you got a D&D person or a GM, or in the case of D&D, a DM. I prefer GM because you can use it anywhere. DM is only for Dungeons and Dragons. Well, all DMs are GMs, so I prefer the term GM.
I do too. I hardly ever use DM. It's always GM for me.
Yeah, if a game master knows anything about this stuff, or goes out and finds some of the errata from it, it's flavor, which always makes your games way more interesting. And I think it's something that we should talk about more because we don't want this stuff to go away. Yes, calling something Oriental Adventures in 1986 is problematic. They quit calling it that. It's called Kara-Tur now.
Mm-hmm.
Al-Qadim, they learned their lesson, so they call it Al-Qadim. It's still very high adventure, but it has this Middle Eastern flavor. And they didn't just take it from 7th century Islamic stuff. They also took it from the ancient cities of Babylon and Ugarit, and places like that, which are forgotten. They kind of try to bring some of that back, and the ideas of jinns and all this other stuff. The stuff that's been floating around the Middle East for thousands of years, which is honestly part of our Western culture. We just don't talk about it that much. Because the Western culture started there, not in Europe. It went there and then went to Europe. So yeah, you want to get some of that in there, and there's a lot of stuff going on in Asia at the time too. It's like, yes, you want to make each one of the cultures interesting and different, but you can't, it's a role-playing game. You can't give somebody the history of Japan because it goes back to the Jomon, and that's 5,000 years ago. You can't do that. There's not enough space. So you have to kind of add in the flavor with the history and the playability. And I think with Maztica, they kind of overcompensated and wanted to show the conquistadors and how horrible they were, but it gave the ability for the Maztica to fight the conquistadors and eventually push them off, which is what happens in the novels. But honestly, that they went a little too far. They need to back that up and go, don't worry about the conquistadors. Let's talk about what's going on in Maztica, because there's a lot of weird, cool shit going on, and we need that. I think all of this stuff is brilliant, especially when you incorporate Spelljammer, where you can go to different places. And if your D&D group has been playing for 5-10 years, and you've only ever been in one little region of Greyhawk, or which where Calaman is, or Calamar, or you've only been on the Sword Coast in Faerun, you're doing yourself a disservice.
Mm-hmm.
When all of this stuff is out there, it is all dirt cheap, or in most cases, free to get this stuff. Yes, if you want like an original published in mint condition, it's going to cost you some money because they're out of print. But you can go to a half price or a used bookstore and find most of this stuff readily available because people are constantly trading their stuff in. Especially people who picked it up and read it because it had cool pictures, and they're like, I don't really want to use this, and they, went traded in to a used bookstore so they could get something they did want to use. In a lot of cases, that's what happens.
Hey, for those of you in Dallas Fort Worth, go to Denton and go to the Opera House.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I bet they have some.
Yeah, their gaming section is bigger than most comic book shops. Because it's a giant used bookstore.
Mm.
And they've got a little bit of everything. And a good record shop too. So yeah, I would recommend Kara-Tur, Al-Qadim, Maztica, and Anchorome. You know, roll the dice. You may end up making one of your characters like lycanthropy. It makes a character more interesting later on, and you can get some stats out of it. So fuck it, why not? And if you don't like it, kill them off and roll another one up.
Right.
You can make them. You can make them the same. I'm gonna be Crunk. Now I'm gonna be Crunk too.
We had a character in one of the games we played that every time he died, he created the exact same duplicate of the last character, and we started calling him Snake de Jour.
Yeah, because they're always snake names.
Yes.
Snake de Jour.
Snake de Jour. Died all the time.
Yeah.
Died all the time.
Snake de Jour. All right, well, that's about it. I think I've geeked out enough.
Awesome. Appreciate that. Get out and check that out. We've talked many role-playing games before, different types. I think all of them are valuable. I don't care what the brand is, what the game type is. GURPS, Dungeons and Dragons, Shadowrun, Cyberpunk 2020, Firefly, Fate. Savage Worlds, all those out there are so good. And, I talked about this when we talked about my book that's out, that our experience through role-playing game forged massive friendships that people I call family. And they're really more family to me than blood in a lot of ways. I would do anything for those people, and they would do anything for me, and it all came through our bonding of various role-playing games. And I can't stress enough how important that is. Without that group, I never would have had prime numbers. Without that group, I wouldn't have had some of the best times of my life. Sitting around a table.
Let me give them a timeline. Okay. Don goes to the local comic book shop. Was it Heroes or was it Lone Star? Do you remember
I don't remember because
it was either Heroes or Lone Star.
It was one of the two, because Keith was the one that ended up going to a comic book shop looking for a gaming group, because whether it was Heroes or Lone Star, they had a book that you could sign in, hey, I've got an RPG group, or hey, I'm looking for an RPG group.
Yeah. And he was specifically starting a Shadowrun campaign, because he and I had sat down and made some characters, and then I moved out, and he was pissed because I owed him some rent money. I eventually paid him. But I'd rolled up my character, and he's like, there weren't enough people to play anyway. So he put this ad out for people to come and play, because he was going to GM this Shadowrun game. This is about 1992, if I'm not mistaken.
I'm probably in there somewhere.
Yeah. So then Keith comes up and started playing with Don. And then I came back and I started playing. We had a couple people that would come in and come out, like like Jerry. I'm not going to say his full name, but like Jerry. Jerry would come and play. He played for a couple sessions and leave. And then you came in and started playing all the time.
Yep.
And then we got Gail.
Mm-hmm.
And
I think we're out of order a little bit there somewhere, but roughly. And then we ended up getting Randy and a lot, and various people that came in and out throughout the years. But
but that's how it started.
Yeah, our core group was really where it was at, and like I said, they are friendships I will never forget, and RPGs are a huge part of it. That's something I instilled to my daughter, is that don't discount these friendships you will forge through RPGs,
Mhm.
because she's playing her own RPGs with friends where she lives now, and I've told her many times, don't discount these friendships, because these are bonds you'll never forget.
Oh
They're
yeah,
great.
especially in your early 20s. It beats sitting around watching binge watching stuff together. Just
Hmm.
play something instead. And
Well,
what's great is you don't have to always do an RPG, or you don't have to always do the same RPG. You run a campaign, you get tired of that campaign, someone else GMs and does that,
right.
or that week you take a break and play a strategy board game instead.
Yeah.
That's how you do it.
Yep.
And when you're in your early 20s, yeah, I could go hang out at the bar, do something else, but I would rather go and do this. You know what I mean? I would rather go and do this in my 20s. That's what we did. Um, we did some hanging out at the bars too, but yeah,
Hmm.
that was all secondary to, oh, hey, we're not playing D&D or Shadowrun or Savage Worlds or whatever this week. This week, we're going to play Axis and Allies or something else. And that's what we would do. And it was fucking awesome. Fucking awesome. Or, goddamn, we'd have, we'd have card games, Massive Magic, or that, uh, oh my God, the superhero game that we played.
We played both Marvel and DC.
Yeah, but the card game.
Oh no, you're talking about with the little figures, HeroClick.
No, not the click ones. The actual card game. We had it. There
I
was a
remember.
card game that we
Oh, I
played.
guess I remember that.
Yeah.
I remember HeroClix better. But yeah. Anyway, so that's the long way around to what I was saying. Just don't discount the bonds you can form. Get a good group of friends, and you can meet people you never would have met.
Hmm.
That you never would have met, and have some absolutely fun times. Absolutely fun times. So thank you for that, Zig.
You're welcome.
With that, we'll step over to the murder side of the house.
Murder.
For today, I got my information off ABC News Australia, The Guardian,
Australia.
Australia, The Guardian, BBC News, Wikipedia, and Medium. And this is the story of the Lin family murder.
The Lin Family Murder.
So this is yet another horrifying case, one about envy and insatiable greed, both powerful and dark emotions. That often drive people down the path of crime, unfortunately. When combined with the unrestrained lust and obsessive need to control others, these feelings can form a terrifying, deadly intent. It's a very chilling concept, and it often becomes more sinister when these emotions secretly boil within a single family. So this story will unfold in the suburbs of Sydney, Australia, revolving around the Lin family, which from outward appearances was very harmonious, and it was a very large household. The story itself evolved into one of the most disgraceful and bloodstained crimes in Australian history. The complexity and duration of the investigation deserves special attention because the perpetrator grew increasingly confident that he could escape justice. His carefully planned and brutally executed scheme was nearly flawless. However, one minor overlooked detail ultimately led police to the crucial breakthrough. So here we go. Let's dive into the beginning of this saga and explore how a cocktail of greed, envy of others' success, and corrupt passion can drive someone to madness, turning them into a monstrous figure who, in their frenzy, spared not even children. So the love story of the Lins began in the late 1980s while they were studying at an Australian university. They were both natives of China. They had immigrated separately to pursue higher education, Lily through an exchange program, and Min, who was 2 years her senior, remained in the country for a professional internship after obtaining his bachelor's degree.
Oh, Lin, not Lyn.
Correct,
Okay.
Lyn.
Okay.
Their path crossed in a university corridor, leading to what they later described as love at first sight. Sharing common roots and dreams, they felt like outsiders in a foreign land, but they were united by a mutual desire to start a new life in Australia. After graduating, the couple married and settled in the picturesque, peaceful suburb of North Epping in Sydney. Their love blossomed into a large, close-knit family, deeply connected and devoted to one another. In August of 1994, their first child was born, a daughter named June Brenda Lin, who was mostly called by her middle name Brenda. Their son Henry was born in 1997, and the youngest Perry in 2000. Entering the 2000s, Min and Yun decided to go into business by opening a small newspaper kiosk. And their dedication to this really took it from a modest beginning into a thriving news agency with a publishing division on Rose Street. So the family prospered, which allowed them to enjoy a comfortable lifestyle with a spacious home, a luxury car, prestigious private education for their children. Min focused on business affairs while Yoon dedicated herself to managing the household and raising their children. They were respected in the community for their hard work, kindness, and philanthropy. Help me.
Philanthropic?
Thank you. Philanthropy. Philanthropy. That's the word I couldn't get. Thank you. They were known as exemplary, caring parents who never became involved in conflicts. Brenda, their eldest daughter, was a striking beauty and an excellent student with a compassionate heart for animals. The boys, Henry and Terry, were energetic and passionate about sports, sharing a love for soccer. The siblings were all very tightly bonded, almost inseparable from another. And as the Lins settled in Australia and their financial situation improved, they began inviting relatives from China to visit, live with them, or even stay permanently. In the early 2000s, Min's parents were the first to move. They settled into North Epping, close to the family, and helped care for the children. Min's father also worked at their newspaper kiosk on weekends, and several years later, Yun's parents also moved to the Sydney suburb, and Min and Yun bought them a small house. Yun's sister Irene moved in with the Lins, helping with household chores and childcare. By this time, the Lin family business generated substantial income, reportedly approaching $1 million a year. Their enterprise was not just a shop or publishing office. It was a local hub where people gathered to read and discuss news over a cup of coffee. By the end of 2007, Min Lin's younger sister, Kathy Lin, and her husband, Liang bin Robert Z, had also moved to Australia in search of better opportunities in Sydney. They had previously visited relatives in Australia and lived briefly in Melbourne before returning to China. This time, however, they were determined to settle permanently in Australia. Robert formerly was a successful ENT doctor in China and decided to change careers and go into business. So the Z's opened their own restaurant in Sydney. They invested all their savings into it, but the business struggled and soon closed. They tried after that to open a cafe and a diner, but those also failed. Robert lacked business acumen and financial management skills, so he faced a lot of difficulty every time he did the new ventures. And eventually, Robert and Kathy moved to North Epping, closer to the family. Kathy found a job, but Robert remained in a phase of self-discovery, uncertain about his future path. And so Lin and the Lin and Z families were connected not only by blood, but a deep and enduring friendship. They saw each other almost every day. They kept in constant contact and often gathered family dinners. The last such gathering took place on the evening of Friday, May 17th, 2009, at the home of Kathy and Min's parents. On the morning of July 18th, the Lin family shop was unexpectedly closed, surprising its regular customers. The store, which had been open 7 days a week for many years, showed no signs of activity, no notices or warnings on the door. This caused concern among customers and neighboring business owners. One of them, after failed attempts to reach Min, called his sister, Kathy, to inquire about the situation. And Kathy was both surprised and alarmed, knowing her brother never would have closed shop for a day without prior notice. And if needed, his father or father-in-law would usually cover for him. So she tried calling Min and then his wife Yoon, but to no avail. The calls to the home phone went unanswered. And so worried, Kathy and her husband decided to visit the Min house to make sure everything was all right. They arrived about 9 a.m. They noticed the family car parked in the driveway and found the front door unlocked. There were no signs of the homeowners. The house was eerily silent, and none of the family responded to their calls. The house itself appeared untouched with no signs of forced entry. Kathy, then still calling for her brother, went upstairs. She opened the door to Min and Yunlin's bedroom and then screamed in shock and horror because of the gruesome scene in front of her. The room was drenched in blood, covering the floor, walls, ceiling, furniture, and curtains. The lifeless body of 43-year-old Yun Lin lay beside the bed, mutilated beyond recognition. And in the adjacent room where 39-year-old Irene, Yun's sister, had been sleeping, it was just as bad. Irene lay dead in her bed, her face a bloodied mass. And in the children's bedrooms, 12-year-old Henry and 9-year-old Terry had also been brutally beaten to death. Their bodies were found in different corners of the room. Brenda, fortunately, 15 at the time, was away on a school trip that night and hadn't been home during the tragedy. The body of Min Lin was nowhere to be found, which left them hope that he might still be alive. Kathy immediately called in emergency services, but she was in such hysterics from shock she could barely communicate what had happened. She screamed and cried into the phone, begging the medics to come quickly. When the first responders arrived, they could only confirm the death of all the victims. And then after the emergency call, Robert went to get Min's parents, who lived about 10 kilometers away from the crime scene. Police and paramedics arrived within minutes, and what they encountered was immediately described as one of the most horrific scenes they'd ever witnessed. Sadly, it was too late for all the members of the Lin family that were home. Each family had been killed by multiple blows to the head with a blunt object, likely a hammer. However, the murder weapon was nowhere to be found, leading to investigators to conclude the perpetrators taken it with them. Min Lin's body was eventually discovered in his own bedroom, covered with a blood-soaked blanket. And like the rest of the family, he also had been beaten to death in the same manner. It would later turn out that he had actually been the first victim, followed by his wife, her sister, and finally the two boys. Initial examination of the crime scene yielded no significant evidence or leads. The absence of the weapon, combined with the fact that valuables and money had been left untouched, indicated that the main goal had been the elimination of the Lin family and not robbery. At first, investigators suspected multiple attackers, as it seemed unlikely that one person could have overpowered so many victims alone. However, evidence suggested that the children had been awake and desperately tried to escape during the assault, as indicated by blood smears and spatters throughout the house. Interestingly, all the adult victims showed signs of strangulation in addition to head injuries, possibly to minimize resistance during the attack. And in every room, identical bloody shoe prints with a unique tread pattern were discovered, but the brand of the shoe could not be determined, only the size. There were no foreign fingerprints found, which suggested the killer or killers had worn gloves. And initially, there were no leads or theories about the perpetrator's identity, as family, friends, and neighbors unanimously stated that the Lins had no enemies. So the motive behind this murder remained unclear. The time of the attack was estimated between midnight and 3 a.m. on July 18th. Brenda Lin, the eldest and now only surviving member of the Lin family, again was on a school trip in North Caledonia at the time of the tragedy. She first learned about the incident through social media. God, that's got to be horrible. You
Jesus
get on social
Christ.
media, and that's when you
My
find
entire
out your
family's
family has
dead.
been murdered.
Yeah.
Not just dead, but murdered. She had hoped it was a terrible mistake, though, but her Aunt Kathy soon called her, confirming the news through tearful sobs. Brenda was quickly flown back to Sydney, where Kathy and Robert, who were now her new guardians, met her at the airport. Brenda moved in with them because the Lin family home had been sealed off at the crime scene. The next day, Brenda was brought to the police station for questioning. However, she was unable to provide any new information, insisting that her family had no enemies or ill-wishers, and she had noticed nothing unusual for her trip. After the deaths of her family, Brenda became the heir to a significant estate, including property and the family business. However, being a minor and still attending school, her legal guardians, Kathy and Robert, were responsible for managing the estate. Brenda's grandparents also offered their support, but Kathy and Robert insisted on being her primary guardians. Robert even threatened legal action if the elderly relatives sought guardianship, claiming they were too old to care for a teenager. Eventually, though, it was all settled amicably, and Brenda remained with her aunt and uncle. The Lin family shop and publishing business, which had been temporarily closed, soon reopened under the management of the Z's, since Brenda had not yet taken control of the enterprise. Robert also began actively reviewing the family's bank accounts, savings, real estates, and other assets. Investigators and forensic experts repeatedly examined the crime scene, but no concrete leads emerged. They concluded that the killer had most likely acted alone and entered the house quietly, suggesting either an unlocked door or possession of a key. The murderer had worn size 10 shoes with a distinctive ornate tread pattern. The murder weapon, again, we're presuming was a hammer, was never found either inside or around the house. The use of gloves meant there were no fingerprints and no foreign DNA was discovered, only traces belonging to the 5 victims. But there was a peculiar and significant detail in that the bloodstains were found on the door handles of every bedroom where the victims were located, indicating that the killer's bloody gloves had touched them. However, there were no bloodstains on the handle of Brenda's room, showing that she had not been present. So somebody knew she wasn't home.
Yeah.
The incident was widely covered by the media. In the absence of substantial evidence or suspects, numerous improbable theories arose. Rumors circulated about a supposed large Lin fortune that might have motivated the murder. There were theories suggesting a robbery gone wrong, and even speculation about the involvement of local Chinese mafia clans. These theories were not entirely dismissed, considering that the area's history with a burglary gang. The Lin shop had been broken into several months before the tragedy, and the men had reportedly witnessed an armored car robbery a week before the murders. Though the robbers had been masked, the men could not identify them. It was speculated that men might have been killed as a potential witness. So months would pass and the investigation would stall. None of the theories were confirmed and no suspect emerged. The robbery theory is eventually ruled out because, as I said, there was nothing missing from the house. The killer appeared to have a single goal, which was the elimination of the family. Furthermore, on the night of the murders, the electricity in the house had been shut off, indicating the killer knew where the fuse box was located. And the attacker's familiarity with navigating the house in complete darkness suggests a prior knowledge of its layout, possibly even possession of a key. So investigators went back to reviewing the case and listened to Kathy's emergency call, listening to any overlooked clue. And surprisingly, this is where they got their first hint. The tape captured Kathy's hysterical attempts to describe the situation. Their words were tangled and interrupted by screams and sobbing. At the end of the conversation, when the operator confirmed that emergency services were on their way, Kathy suddenly mentioned her husband's name, adding something in Cantonese, addressing him directly. This detail piqued the investigators' interest, prompting a translation of her words, and it turned out that Kathy was pleading with her husband not to leave her alone in the house. This, they determined, was very significant because Robert had decided to drive and fetch the Lin parents himself, leaving Kathy at the crime scene until police arrived. And that the police thought that behavior was highly suspicious. 5 people had just been murdered in this house, and the killer still could have been inside, making Kathy a potential target. Yet Robert appeared calm and simply left as if he knew nothing bad was ever going to happen to his wife. So after several fruitless months, the police decided that they were going to name Robert Z their prime suspect. It turned out he did have a key to the Lin home, which men had given him just in case, shortly before the tragedy. Curiously, Robert never mentioned this during questioning, and Kathy was unaware that her brother had entrusted her husband with the key. Brenda unknowingly revealed this critical detail to investigators. Further investigation showed that Robert's claim of being a successful ENT doctor was a facade. Although he held a medical degree, he had never maintained a stable position in the field. Rumor had it that he had fled to Australia to avoid prosecution for alleged bribery charges in China. In Australia, he failed to establish himself professionally, squandering his remaining savings on unsuccessful business ventures. And after moving to North Epping, he became effectively unemployed, relying on his wife's income and occasional financial assistance from Kathy's relatives. After guardianship documents for Brenda were finalized, Robert acted as though he'd inherited the Lin estate. His first move was to evict June's parents from the house men had bought for them, even though it was legally registered in the late woman's name. Min's parents and Kathy's family remained in the home that had been purchased for them. Given these facts and circumstances, investigators theorized that Robert was driven by deep envy towards his wife's more successful and affluent relatives, and that he had long harbored a plan to seize their property, wealth, and profitable business. Despite the fact that he was living under the same roof as the killer, that they were living under the same roof as the killer, Brenda and Kathy were not considered in immediate danger. Brenda suspected nothing about her guardian's true nature, while Kathy was useful to Robert for maintaining control of the family assets. However, police could not arrest Robert due to lack of concrete evidence. The investigation team obtained authorization to install several hidden cameras in the Z residence with the aim of gathering necessary evidence to prove Robert's guilt. This breakthrough would come through sooner rather than expected. Kathy mentioned her husband's preference for a specific brand of shoes, and several years earlier, Robert had bought 2 pairs of limited edition sneakers that he particularly liked. He had worn out and threw away one pair, but one was still carefully stored in its boxes home. Notably, Robert wore size 10 shoes, just like the killers. The key piece of evidence emerged when Robert was caught on the hidden camera, meticulously destroying the box that had contained the aforementioned shoes. This footage led to a warrant for a search of the suspect's home, where a new pair of size 10 sneakers was found. The tread pattern on these shoes matched the footprints discovered at the crime scene. Additionally, in his garage, investigators found a small smeared trace resembling blood. Forensics analysis confirmed that it was indeed blood, and it contained the DNA of all 5 Lin family victims, literally linking him to the crime scene. This is the evidence that led to Robert's arrest, finally providing police with the concrete proof they needed to take action. In May of 2011, which was 2 years after the incidents, all this evidence did result in the arrest of Robert Z. He adamantly denied any involvement, claiming blood found in his garage appeared there after their return from the Lin residence. He also dismissed the significance of the sneakers with the matching tread pattern found in his home, insisting they were brand new and that he had promptly discarded the old pair. While waiting for trial in prison for 3 years, he unwittingly shared his cell with several informants. In one of these conversations, he confessed to meticulously planning the crime and covering his tracks. He mentioned that he had purchased the murder weapon in a remote store with no surveillance cameras, and he had drugged his wife P with sedatives so she would not wake up or notice his absence. He disposed of the hammer, sneakers, gloves, and clothing in such a way they would never be found. This man's an idiot.
Mm-hmm.
At trial, he denied everything, and the only evidence against him consisted of the statements of his cellmates and the previously mentioned circumstantial evidence. As a result, the jury was unable to reach a unanimous verdict, and Robert was released on bail in December of 2015. The trial resumed in June 2016 with testimony from another informant who claimed that Robert had confessed to having an intimate relationship with Brenda. This led to Brenda being re-interviewed, during which she tearfully revealed that Robert had coerced her into sexual relations shortly after she began living with them, and fearing retaliation, she remained silent for the abuse for years. And so with all these revelations and supporting evidence, Robert Z was found guilty on all counts. He received 5 life sentences, 1 for each murder, without the possibility of parole. I absolutely love that. And all of his subsequent appeals were rejected. And that's the story of the Lin family murder.
That's fucked up.
It is fucked up, but hey, he's going to be buried under the jail.
Yeah, they're going to bury his ass under the jail.
Yeah. 5 life sentences. Say goodnight.
Yeah, he ain't getting out.
So I found that story very interesting. So that's why I wanted to share that one this week. I appreciate you taking that journey with me.
Well, thank you, sir.
All right, so that will take us to the end of another recording week of Nerdery and Murdery. As always, you can find more about us on nerderyandmurdery.com. That's our hub. That's our website for everything about us. You'll find links. You'll find pictures, as well as the link to our YouTube page, which is so often update.
Yes, check this one out. It's got a lot of stuff about those things, as well as some of the character classes and types, which might be interesting to you if you want to play that sort of thing.
Awesome. Appreciate that.
Thank you, sir.
You can also find the link to our merchandise page, where if you wish to show off your Nerdery and Murdery fandom, please do consider purchasing something from that. That, along with our patrons, you'll find our Patreon link on our page, but merchandise along with our patrons do help with the costs that are associated with this show. It's not cheap. It's not free. It costs for our uploads, for our storage, for our website, and everything that's associated with that, and we appreciate each and every one of you.
Please and thank you.
One thing you can do for free, though, is please leave a 5-star review wherever you can. It really helps us and helps others find our content that may be looking for the information that we discuss. And last, but certainly not least, as always, Chuck, you can go on to sleep now.
Good night, Chuck.
Good night,
Tabaxi. That is the name of the cat people. Tabaxi. I was looking for the word. They changed the name. I was looking for it for like an hour.
Okay, Chuck, you can't go to sleep yet. You got to know about the backseat.
Yeah, Tabaxi.
Tabaxi.
Good night,
okay.
Chuck.
Now go sleep, Chuck. Good night.
Good.
With that,
I have been Zig with your Nerdery.
and I'm Geoffrey with your Murdery.
Cue the music.
Static crackles, dream state, nerdery and murdery fate. Voices in the wire, two dudes light the fire. Obsession and confession, games and death's procession. Through the microphone they speak, dark secrets, geeks seek. Nerdery, murdery, crazy blend, horror tales that never end. Dice roll, blood spills, podcasts thrill, the mind fills. Techie talk, ghostly howl, geekdom's graveyard prowl. Mingling thoughts collide, fascination can't hide. Twisted tales they share, darkness in the air, mysteries untold, audiences hold. Rolling out the lore, eerie tales and more. Behind the tales they hide, narratives collide. Fairy tales and more.